All right, so with OS 3.9 being released, I've had some people ask about the new features and styles. So this is going to be a crash course on some of the stuff available. There's actually so much in this release that one video won't cover it. And also, there's a lot to learn. So hopefully do this kind of bite size to get people started. Um, I do have my library. I've done since alpha on this OS. I've been messing with it. I've got a pretty good grasp of it. I've built out this library uh, for styles that if you just want to grab them and use them, or also as roadmaps because there's a lot you can do and there's a lot of ways to do it. So I'm going to show some really basic stuff today. Um, but I would say experience level would be intermediate for this. If you have not built styles by hand, this video might not help you. So I would say watch some of the other videos I have in Crash Course to get comfortable with that. You can use Editor for some of the stuff, but really for all these new features until the editor gets updated with them, it's not going to be helpful for what I'm going to show today. So it's all going to be hand coding, etc. But I'm going to kind of give you a rundown of it, what to look for, how to do it, just to get you started. But it's really, particularly when we add transitions, which I'll be talking about a little bit more, um, the possibilities, there's just so much possible that you kind of have to pick a start point and just dive in. I can't possibly cover all of it. But if you just want to get styles to get up and running, library would be my first suggestion. And then if you want to start dissecting those and messing with them, then that might help you. But I'm going to give you kind of some other start points. So everything's going to be done in WordPad. I know some of you use other programs for your editing. This is what I use since whatever works for me. If you like color coding, if you like those other programs that do line numbering, etc., that's great. I use it this way because this is how I learned, and this is what works for me. The first thing with OS 3. By default, there is color change now. So the fork, if you're familiar with it, you had to define color change to each preset in order to have it. That is still possible. That's what I'm going to talk about in a minute. But by default, there's also a color change to the system, which is called the color wheel. If you have a preset from previous versions of the main OS, you can't bring the fork stuff over easily. There's like maybe one or two ways you could, but it ends up being more work. So the fork is not what we're going to talk about. But if you have like a 2.9 style that you like that doesn't have color change, and you bring it over to 3.9, it will automatically have color change using the color wheel. The color wheel, you would enter, depending on your profile, just hold aux and power. It'll go into color change mode. You can rotate your hilt. It'll actually rotate through all the possible colors. And it will change any color in a preset except for white and black. So if you have an audio flicker with an A and a B, the A and B both increment at the same amount based on how much you turn that hilt. And then you would hit the power button to exit color change mode, and that locks in that color. There's also a lot of defines related to it. So if you wanted to save that color, if you want to save presets, if you want to change how you change the colors, I would say go read through the beta thread up on TRA, and then also the release thread, just so you can kind of see it. But there's way too much. I'm not going to be able to cover it all. So I'm going to cover a couple things here just to get everybody started. But there's just so much now with this release that it'll be several videos as I get time. So color wheels by default, you don't have to do anything. You can take your existing styles, you can build a style in editor, you can drop it in, and then enter the color wheel, and it'll do color change for you without you having to do anything, which is a nice feature for those of you who don't want to build styles. This video is for those of you who do. Um, so, and then also the second part of this will be about transitions, which are just amazing, but they also will be, you have to learn them, and you kind of have to just get your hands in there and get dirty if you want to really understand them. So for color change, now color change, this style did exist in the fork, but it's a little different in the main OS. The biggest difference is the transition. Now, a transition just for the OS, all that means is that you're going to, it does, the blade effects do something between each color or effect that you put in place. So the parameters for color change in the main OS are color change as a definition, then some kind of transition. And there's a list of transitions available. And really, I'll show them shortly, but you're just going to want to learn them. So if you just want it to instantly change colors, you just put TR instant, and that's the simplest basic setup. Then you would put a group of colors together, and I'm just going to do a couple here just to show you. So this would be a color change in a style. It will change the color from red to blue to green as I advance. So you can set it up as a click to change using the color change direct define, which again, go read up about it. Or if you have color change in your preset and you just leave it as default, if you hit the aux and power, again, it's different if you use different prop files, it would enter color change mode, and as you rotate the hilt, it will go from red to blue to green, back to red again. And in this case, it will be an instant change. Now, if I put something in like a wipe or a fade with a timing parameter, it will change from the first to the second color over that period of time with that particular transition effect. Um, but for starting points, let's do that. So now most of your effects in the Proffie board will have two colors. So we'll make this A, and then let's make a B color change to go with it. And you can have multiple of these in your preset. So, oops, I forgot my TR. So, one thing I will recommend, if you do have multiple color change instances in a preset, use the same transition and also use the same timing. If you mix transitions, sometimes the end result isn't quite what you want. And then also, if you're using the rotation of the hilt to change colors and you have a long transition mixed with a short transition, it's just not going to look good. It's just because you're trying to do too much with it. So for our purposes and for starting purposes, use the same transition for all instances of color change. And you can also have different numbers. So you can have up to 12 colors in a color change style, but I'm only doing 3 here just to make it easy. So that's RGB 12800 will be with red, RGB 00128 will be blue, and then RGB 01280 will be with the green, and then close that. And then you can also say I want to have different blast colors. You can also do that. So we'll do blast with color change, TR instant. And then let's say when it's a red blade, we'll do a blue blast. When it's a blue blade, we'll do a red blast. And when it's a green blade, we'll do a yellow blast. So now this will if I put this in a preset, it will give me control over the A color, the B color, and the blast color. So now let's go build an actual style. And the reason I usually do these out separate is because I use them in a lot of places. It just makes it easier. So again, I'm going to be really basic. So let's start off. I want just to do an audio flicker blade with color change. So audio flicker has an A, comma, has a B, and then we'll close it. And this is, if you've seen my other videos, this is usually how I start. Just makes everything very visible. So now for A, if I want to have color change with those 3 colors, I'm going to put this here. Make sure that comma stays. If you lose that comma, you're going to get a compiler. Commas and brackets. That's what usually causes compiler errors in my experience. All right, so now color B is here. So we will put color B in place. So now this is my audio flicker and 2 colors. And those 2 colors, it'll start out red with the second color being the RGB 12800. If I change the color, again, there's several prop files and there's also several defines available. So how you do that is there's a lot of variables involved. But when you change the color, the first change will go blue, RGB 128 or 00128. When I change it again, it'll go to green and then RGB 01280. And if I change it again, it'll go back around to being red. And then how it goes from each color, in this case, will be instant. So the second I do the action to change the color or use the color change direct to do the button, click to change, it will go to the next color. If you wanted to have it do like a fade or a wipe or a boing, there's a bunch of them. You would put that in this spot. And each of those transitions, which we'll touch on in a little bit, have their own parameters. So those also have to be included. So if you don't use TR instant, you will have additional parameters to include. But as a start point, start this way. All right, so I've got my audio flicker blade. That's all I'm putting in. Now, obviously, I want to put a blast in. So let's put a blast. And if you're not familiar with wrapping and nesting, then I would say go check out one of my other videos about that. Um, but this now in Blast, there's going to be, this is my base color. My base color is an audio flicker with these color change parameters. I need a comma here. And now I need the actual Blast color to be defined. And then for our purposes, I've already built it. So I'm going to take color change here, and that is now my Blast. And then I need to close Blast. All right. And now say I wanted to add a clash, but I want the clash to stay the same. So I don't necessarily want clash to have color changing. So let's just put a simple clash in. And white is pretty straightforward, so we'll just do white so I can do simple clash. This now becomes my base blade. So I need a comma here. White is going to be my clash color, and then I will close it. So now that's it. And you would just keep going through with that. And if you put a lockup in and you wanted the lockup color to change, you would do that. If you want the drag color to change, you would use a color change and just build them out. And again, I only put 3 in here just for demo purposes. You can go up to 12. You can also do different transitions. Again, learning those would kind of be a second step. But you can put those in and you would just build this out. And this is now your style. And obviously when I bring it over to my config file, I'm going to recombine it. But that's basically the color change. If you've seen the other videos, you just combine. As you're recombining, watch your commas and watch your brackets. If you delete one, you're definitely getting a compiler and you're going to have to figure it out. So it's better to watch as you go back and recombine. And now that would be my style. Now, this is not a complete style. So obviously you would want to add your in-out helper, you'd want to add your lockup, anything else you wanted to have happen with this particular blade you'd want to build out. But this is, again, just a start point to get you all in there. All right. So now the second thing I'm going to cover is transition effects. Now, transition effect, this is a transition in color change. That is one thing. So when I say transition effect, there's actually a style now called transition effect. Now, transition effect, it's not going to be in style editor. And this is like a can of worms. So I'm going to start simple. I would say you do the same. Transition effect can be used pretty much everywhere for so many different things that it's hard to nail down. And if you've been playing with the styles in my library, you will see I have a ton of them. Actually, I think I have this opened already. Yeah. So this is one of those styles. Now my styles historically get very long anyway, but this particular one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 transitions, and I also believe I have a couple nested transitions for a different purpose. But at any rate, these transition effects do a lot of different things. Basically, my kind of layman's term, easy way to get you started with thinking about transition effects is they are enhancements to the existing effects. You can use them also to replace an existing effect. That gets a lot more complicated quickly. So for starting off, easiest thing to do is just think about it. A transition effect is something you add to the other effect to have something happen to kind of just do more with it. So this will be, all right, how to show this. All right, I'm going to open this up just to show you guys something. And you don't have to go crazy on this, but in your OS, there's a blades folder. In blades, there's blade base. This list here, this blade effect type. Now there's a blaster effect type, that's for blasters. So just look here. These are all of the effects available that you can use transition effect for. None obviously is nothing, so you wouldn't use that, but you can use a transition effect for your clash. You can use a transition effect for your blast. You can also use a transition effect for force. Now, by default, force is a sound effect, but you can define a transition effect to use force. So when you trigger force, you can have the blade do something. Stab, boot, less to a lesser extent. Lockup begin, lockup end, drag begin, drag end, ignition, retraction, and then color change, or they call it change. That's if you use the click to change feature. So that would be if you use the define of color change direct and you set up a color changing style, you can add a transition effect to that um, on top of the transition that's in it. It gets a little complicated, but it basically lets you do some additional things. That one we'll ignore for now too. But for the most part, this clash, blast, force, stab, lockup begin, lockup end, drag begin, drag end, ignition, and retraction. Those are the main ones I would say start off with. And the one that I know a lot of people will probably be most interested in would be the lockup begin and lockup end. So let's take a look at that. So we're going to use transition effect to set up with a lockup so that when the lockup is initiated, there'll be an initial effect that then transitions to the actual lockup. And then when we release lockup, it'll go from the actual lockup to the end effect. And then what that does is it gives you that power up cooldown that I talk about in my library. That's kind of how you do it with the main OS. We did it differently in the fork. So now, related to lockup. All right, so the reason I open this file is you need to know these. You need to know the syntax. So it's just all uppercase, effect, underscore, and then the name has to be exact or else you'll get a compile error as well. So now let's go here. So transition effect. The format for transition effect, you can look this up in the, let me see, we'll go here. I'll open this. So you can see the syntax. If you go again, OS, you're going to go down to styles. I'm going to go to transition effect, open it up, and this is the parameter. So color, this is base. What's the effect that's going, what's the actual effect color that's going to happen when you go into this particular transition effect? How does it come in? How does it go out? And then what triggers it? That's basically the breakdown. So base color, what happens, how it comes into play, which is transition 1, which is like the transition in, how it leaves, which is the transition 2, and then what effect triggers it. And that's why on that style I just showed, there were 7 of them, because I'm using it on lockup begin, lockup end, ignition, retraction, drag begin, drag end, and probably a couple more. So that's the syntax we need. So let's start off. So transition effect. So first is the base color. I'm keeping, let's make it simple. I'm going to do this completely separate. Let's just do an audio flicker as our base color. And we'll go red. And this would obviously be what you specifically want. Then what do I want to, what's the effect that's going to happen when I trigger it? Let's do just a brown noise flicker. Obviously, you'd want to really design this, but let's just go with a white, red, and we'll make it pretty unstable looking. All right, how does it come into play? So for most of your effects, I recommend just the TR instant. All right, because when you trigger it, you want this to happen immediately. Now, you could use other effects that have a timing parameter. You could use a fade, you could use a wipe, color cycle, etc. But then you have to remember, when you actually see it on the blade, it'll actually look a little laggy because you're going to have, say, on this case, this is going to be for a lockup begin. When I initiate lockup, if I have something that has a time on it, lockup's going to begin, the sound's going to start playing, but that effect is going to take however many milliseconds you define to show up fully. So it does not look great coming in for a lot of these. Certain ones look good, but other ones I would recommend just go TR instant. So again, starting point, the transition in, the first transition is TR instant. Now, the effect itself is actually only going to be for a second or for whatever a frame rate is, because it's when it gets triggered and then it disappears. If you want it to stay, that's where you add those timed out transitions. So the transition out for most of them, again, as you play with these, you'll see what I mean, is where you want a timing parameter. So I'm going to say TR fade. There's a ton of them. You're going to want to learn these individually, but TR fade. And let's say we'll give it a 600 millisecond runtime. All right. So what that means is that the base blade will be the audio flicker red. And then, oh, well, let me do this part. So now the last piece of this, the 5th parameter in transition effect, is what triggers it. And that's where that list from blade base comes into play. So this is going to be triggered by effect lockup begin. All right. Now, this seems like a lot to some people, I'm sure. So other people are maybe already familiar with this. As long as you know that list and are familiar with that list, it's not a big deal. But you're just all you're doing is you're just saying what triggers this thing I just built. That's all that really is. All right. So now what this means is that my base blade is a red audio flicker. When I begin a lockup, it's going to instantly turn to a brown noise flicker. That brown noise flicker will appear, but it will already immediately start going away. It starts going away using a fade transition, so it will fade from the brown noise flicker to the next effect, which we have to define, over 600 milliseconds. Again, you can use any of the transitions. This is where that exponential kind of unlimited comes into play. Doing a fade looks one way. You could do the wipe, you could do the wipe in, you could do the color cycle, you could do the blowing, and get a completely different looking effect because of it. And again, you can change the timing on it. So it's really going to be what you like and what you want to do. And that's where learning is going to be so important, is that, I can tell you what I like and how I build them. That doesn't really matter because everybody has their own taste. So learn the basics and then get better at it and then make your own is going to be my biggest recommendation. But that's that transition effect. So now I've got this built. So now that's for lockup begin. Now I want to put a transition effect for lockup end. So transition effect. Now this becomes my base blade of transition effect. So I need a comma here. Now what effect do I want to have on this lockup end? Let's just go, let's just do a fire just because. Again, I'm just throwing this stuff together, so you guys will style it how you want. So we'll just do a fire. So the second transition effect is going to be a base of this. When the lockup end is happens, there'll be a fire blade. I want that fire blade to start immediately. So TR instant, and I have a typo. Then I want it to go from that fire blade back to the base blade or the base color, but I want to give it time to happen. If you did TR instant, you actually wouldn't see this because it's too quick. So I'm going to say this time we will do, let's do a TR fade, but we'll give it a little more time. We'll give it 800 milliseconds. And then we will define this with the end and then close it. So now I've got a second trend. So this is where, again, that library style that has 7 of them, this is how you get there. And I would say start with 1 or 2, load them up, see what they look like, tweak them, get them perfect. Once you're happy with it, add another, and then do the same thing and add another. Don't try to dump them all together, especially if it's a first go at it. And I have a comma in here that does not belong. So it's transition effect. This is the base of that first transition effect. So in that first transition effect, there is a base of an audio flicker. The effect will be a brown noise flicker. It will happen instantly to start out. It will then fade out, and it will be triggered by effect lockup begin. Then this being the base of the second one, when this second one is triggered, there will be a fire with red and orange. It will instantly appear. It will fade out over 800 milliseconds, and it will be triggered by effect lockup end. Now, again, transition effects, you're going to want to use them with the actual effects. You can do them separately, but particularly with lockup, you would actually just get this. It would come in, go out, and you would actually have a lockup effect. So we're going to want to also define a lockup. So we're going to define a lockup. So then this is the base of lockup. And then for our purposes, let's say the lockup's going to be a strobe of white and red. I forgot a comma. You have to do your syntax correctly, or that's on you. All right, and then we're just doing that for now. There's obviously the other parameters for drag, etc. Also, there's shape parameters. I'm not going to cover those now. Those will be something we have to do in the future, but those are there. But for our purposes, let's set this up. So that's the lockup effect, and then we'll close it out. So now I have a lockup. My lockup is actually just a strobe between white and red, and it's a pretty quick strobe. Now, when I trigger lockup, effect lockup begin, you'll get a brown noise flicker that triggers instantly. It will then fade to this strobe, and this is where the learning and the playing comes into play because it's not in a specific order that makes it, easy. That's where I'd say start small and learn. All right, but now so that lockup begins. It's going to do brown noise flicker for instantly activated. It will then fade out over 600 milliseconds, so it's really quick. It will then be a strobe, white and red, and then when I release lockup, it will go to a fire with red and orange instantly, and then it will fade out over 800 milliseconds all the way back to my audio flicker. And that's what happens. So I have my actual lockup effect, which runs while you're holding lockup. It's just there's now these transition effects in and out that have been built out, and that's what these two guys handle. So I know it's a lot to take in. I would say go back over this, but just take a look and build this out slowly and then test it. And then you can do them again for everything else. And again, these transitions, so I just have TR instant and TR fade. There's a lot of additional ones. Again, there's wipe in, boing, color cycle. And then there's actually ones that get even crazier. There's the concat, which lets you do a ton of stuff, but learn the easy ones first before you try to do concat. There's join and join R, which is also complicated. So again, before you start diving into those, learn the basic ones. But just play around with them, learn them, and then build these styles out. And then that'll hopefully kind of get everybody started. There is a ton more. There's just so many features that I'll probably have to try to get some time to do more videos on them. But seeing as everybody's already getting this and asking questions, I figured I'd put this together quickly just so you have something to start with. And then I'd say, again, recommendation, play around, start small, get bigger as you go. If you're impatient and you want to just jump in, take a look at the library. I do have OS 3 or later library that has all of this stuff in it. Particularly if you scroll down to the showcase styles at the bottom, they have, I pretty much threw the kitchen sink at these so that everything that I could think of at that time is in there. There's actually more stuff I'm going to probably add to this library when I get time for it. But these would be good starting points if you just wanted to take something and dissect it. But these are big and there's a lot going on. So I would say learn the basics, dive into these. If you just want to go run with these, great. Take them and use them. If you want to load them up and make some small tweaks and learn that way, if you want these as a roadmap, whatever way you learn best. But there is a lot to learn. You're not going to just load up the OS and know everything because I've been playing with this since the alpha stage, so it's been a couple months and stuff of playing with it, and there's still stuff I'm learning new. So just take the time to learn, play around, and enjoy. If you have questions, I would say definitely post in the TRA thread because for as much as I know, this is Frederick's baby, so he knows this stuff inside and out. So he would be the best to answer. If there's questions, then he obviously doesn't get around to answering them. I can help out answering, but he's going to be the one who knows everything. I'm coming at it from having learned this stuff, but I am definitely still learning. It's probably going to be a continuous learning curve to get to do absolutely everything. But there's a lot possible, and again, just changing, even just with these transition effects, just changing that transition 1 and 2 completely changes how the effect actually looks. So test them out, learn them, play with all of them. I also, I'm going to link this in the description for this YouTube video. I do have the original alpha test, which shows you what the transitions look like. You can take a look at that just if you want a visual, because if you haven't loaded them up and you're not sure what they look like, they pretty much look like they sound anyway, but this would also maybe be kind of helpful. But really, the best way to learn these is going to be to take them, play with them, load them up, and go. So hopefully that helps everybody get started. But this is not something you're going to learn in one sitting. This is the easiest thing I could say is just go get in there, get your hands dirty, mess around, and build some styles and have fun with it. All right. So everybody have fun, enjoy, and I'll try to get some more videos shot as I have time. Thanks.